Okay, let's take another question here. This one's from Eric. How should I fire my co-founder? The most uncomfortable situation of all.
Yeah.
And it happens what? How often does it happen? 1 in 10?
So I don't know, we can never really give them a perfect answer to this, because if they've truly formed the company, there's probably not going to be each can terminate each. I mean, it's kind of like a marriage, right? You don't just get to opt out.
Right.
How often does this happen? I mean, we probably see co-founder disputes, I don't know.
I'd say probably at least a third of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So it's more often than people actually hear about. You probably only hear about it in the trades when it totally implodes.
Absolutely. And when it's a company that's real already.
Right. So how does it normally get settled? Do people start talking through the lawyers? Does the investor come in and play daddy or mommy and try to settle it?
The majority of the time, it's someone just deciding that they're not willing to commit to it, and they walk away. So very often it's amicable that one just says to the other, look, this isn't going to work out. I want to take a different direction. I'm not excited enough to be fully committed to this. And they just walk away. There are other times where someone has to be fired, and then it's a lot more contentious. And that usually, in fact, I addressed this about a week ago, where you get a bit of an uncomfortable call at 10 o'clock at night saying, hey, can we chat about my co-founder, and what are the next steps here? And so then you have to counsel them. And it depends on the stage of the company. Is it, a Series B company that has a professional board of directors and, very methodical process that you need to go to? Or is it just two co-founders that you need to sit them down in a room and find an amicable way to separate and not ruin the company for the person that wants to stay and build it?
And for a company that has a board of directors, there's 5 seats. That person might be one of the 5 seats. They're going to get voted off. It's corporate governance at that point.
That's right.
But if they don't have a board, there's no corporate governance in place, and you might just have a convertible note out there. Technically, legally, what happens? Is there a recourse?
When we form the company, there is corporate governance. It's just very basic. So there will be a board, and there will be a CEO, and that's part of what we have discussed historically about, how do you form these companies, and why is it important to do it properly? Well, this is because you want a board of directors, and somebody needs to step up and take that CEO role. And so technically, the board hires and fires the CEO, and then the CEO hires and fires everyone that reports up to them. So you would go through a similar corporate governance exercise, but it may just be one person that you're dealing with, because there's one person that's the sole member of the board and one person that's the CEO, and then the co-founder is the CTO or some other role that they've chosen to take on.
And that's why it's so important that you do have that discussion at inception, right? Just to understand, hey, look, if your co-founder is the sole board member, or if your co-founder is the CEO, understand that puts you at risk. And obviously, we don't represent any particular one founder. We represent the enterprise, right? So we're looking at it from a governance perspective. Let me just explain to you how it works. We're going to put a board in place. You're going to have a CEO. You might be the CTO. But you guys just need to understand, right? Because everybody's best friends from college, and they're going to never, ever have an argument until they do, right? Yeah. And what our job is to just let them know how the landscape works, and the fact that understand that in 6 months' time, you may hate each other, and here's how this could play out. And as long as everybody's understanding of that, then, it's okay.
When a person's being fired and they don't want to be fired,
right,
what is typically the settlement that would occur in one of these stage companies? What would the ask be, or what would the give be on the board or the co-founder? What would be amicable typically?
It's hard because it's very variant depending on who the people are, what the players are. I mean, so I'm in the process right now of negotiating exactly this, and the buyout's $250,000, right? That's more than most companies have raised in a year's time.
So they want to buy that person's shares back.
Exactly.
They don't want them on the cap table.
How do I get you out of this entirely?
Right.
But sometimes it might be, if there's any money at all, there might be some severance. There might be some negotiation of you haven't earned 25% of your stock, but I'll give that to you. You have to give them something to be able to walk, right? But also you don't want to give them so much that you've now hamstrung the company to be able to recruit new talent, which you're invariably going to have to replace.
Right. So if they had 40% and you had 40% and the investors had 20%, you're not going to vest them their 40% because then nobody will come work for the company.
Precisely.
Right? But somebody who is being fired could maybe hold out for that or try to cause problems, and that does happen from time to time.
And we've seen companies tank as a result of that, where there just is no agreement and someone's not willing to give up stock or is not willing to go peacefully, and as a result, the investors are like, I don't want anything to do with this, and it'll die.
So there is a self-correcting mechanism there. If somebody does go nuclear, the investors have more opportunities. So this is something important for founders to realize. If you put yourself in the bucket of unreasonable or unable to come to a reasonable solution between the two or three of you, this could result in investors scarlet lettering the company and just not wanting to be involved. It's just too much nonsense for their time.
Well, yes, that and any portion of their stock that they have vested in the founder that's departing, they're just reducing any value that would have been there. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like it's much better to resign, walk away, and go find your new gig. And try to keep those relationships, and maybe you get some value out of what you built while you were there. And we always, in order to avoid that from the investor issue perspective, try to get settlement and release agreements when someone's walking away. So I think that's
sign some paperwork.
Yeah, that's a tip for the founders that are staying, is always ask for that, because when you're raising money or selling the company in the future, if a large employee stockholder departed, any investor or buyer is going to say, did you get a release? Is this amicable? Can we be certain that they're not going to sue and claim that they're owed more? And that's the function of that release agreement. And that's, in order to get that, you need to give them some consideration. And that's why, as Rachel said, you'll often either give them cash severance or accelerate the vesting on some portion of their stock, just so you're giving them something of value in exchange for the release.
When I was younger, I always thought that these were legal issues, but the older I get, the more I realize they're just conversations between people that have a legal framework as a backdrop. It almost inevitably is settled just through a conversation amongst, hopefully, some reasonable parties in the room with the people who are being unreasonable. It never gets down to the legal actual issues, does it?
I mean, things have gone quite wrong if you need an arbitrator or a mediator or something like that. I think you're spot on that with a little bit of guidance, right, from an advisor, an investor, a counselor, whatever, they will be able to reach the right conclusion. But I think you're spot on. Most of the conversations can solve these things, and you don't need to get into the weeds and minutia. It's really just, it's often emotional, right? So if you can identify sort of what the pain points are. I don't want to be embarrassed that I got fired. I want to work on messaging. I want to make sure I can retain some value here because I want to ride what you're going to make a wild success. If you can solve for those things, again, often that's not totally legal. It's just more solving for the emotional outcome.